Atalanta Fugiens is one of the most famous alchemical works. It is a comprehensive summary of earlier alchemical concepts. More importantly, its emblem discourses demand a particular kind of attention, one that can draw the reader into their symbolic world. The previous parts argued that the overall system of the emblem discourses can be well described by the Roman numerals and their symbolic meaning. Based on this, the book has 5 main themes, each consisting of 10 topics or emblem discourses arranged in 2 arcs. But does Maier refer to these themes? When we examine the emblem discourses, the topics in depth, clear thematic groupings emerge. These topics fall into 5 themes and are linked to specific phenomena. Because these groups represent increasingly higher levels, they can be envisioned as spheres, each rising above the last. The initial ground sphere is closely tied to the traditional attributes of nature. The next X-sphere mostly refers to manual activities, in other words, art. Moving further in the XX sphere, we see the recurring presence of wisdom, representing mental activities. And in the XXX sphere, the central theme is the quest for the stone, which is a key symbol of alchemical perfection and transmutation. The final XL sphere is centered around the concept of transcendence. But does Maier himself refer to these thematic spheres? The XL sphere has a summarizing and concluding character. The motto of Emblem 42 contains a guiding principle. Nature, reason, experience and reading must be the guide, staff, spectacles and lamp to him that is employed in chemical affairs. The accompanying discourse further reinforces this idea. Nature, reason, experience and reading, thereof if anyone be wanting, the rest will do little or no good at all. For by these, as by 4 wheels, the philosophic chariot moves, to which one of the wheels cannot be wanting, if it be left, it avails nothing. And later, the first intention therefore is seriously to contemplate how nature proceeds in her operations. Secondly, reason must be as a staff to keep the steps and feet steady and firm, that they may not slip or waver. For without the exercise of reason, a man will be apt to fall into errors, and therefore say the philosophers, whatsoever you hear, consult with reason, whether it can be so or no. Thirdly, experience will be as spectacles, by which things may be seen at a distance. Fourthly, reading does, as it were, kindle a clear length in the understanding, without which there will be everywhere darkness and thick clouds. Here Maier explicitly outlines 4 key themes. The follow nature in its footsteps, which is the theme of the ground sphere. However, the next ones are reason and experience, but it is possible that the order changed during the creation of the book. As the previous quote continues, nature presupposes natural bodies and spirits as subjects first ministered by nature, upon which art must afterwards act, preparing, purifying and fitting it, that thereof may be made that which art promises for the end. So a potter takes water and earth, a glassmaker ashes and sand. In this excerpt we come across the word art, and the potter plays a central role in topic 15. In the framework of the book, art is directly linked to experience, meaning physical interaction with the world. In contrast, reason represents intellectual interaction, which can also be referred to as wisdom. The next theme is reading, the clear lamp in the understanding. This represents more than just knowledge. It signifies the pursuit of an ideal, also symbolized by the stone, the ultimate goal of alchemy. If we trace back further the development of Maier's thought system, we find an interesting passage right at the beginning of the book's preface. It is a truth denied by none that man in his composition represents a compendium of the universe and is destined to live three kinds of life, namely a vegetable in his mother's womb, where indeed he grows and is increased like a plant, a sensible to wit in this world, where for the most part he is led by the senses, as all other animals, from which he differs in beginning to exercise the understanding, though imperfectly. And lastly, an intelligible in the other world with God and the intelligences or good angels assistant to him. At the beginning of the book, Maier identifies three fundamental realms of existence: vegetable life, which corresponds to nature; sensible life linked to art or experience, that is interaction with the material world; and intelligible life associated with wisdom or reason, the realm of intellect and higher understanding. However, reading is not included there. It appears that Maier initially structured his work around three main themes: nature, art, and wisdom. But as his thought evolved, he expanded this system and introduced the fourth theme, reading, the quest for the ideal, symbolized by the stone. And finally, he added a fifth theme, transcendence, the ultimate realm beyond material existence. Maier's three principles of reason, experience, and reading closely resemble the classification of melancholy in Cornelius Agrippa's book De Occulta Philosophia, published in 1533, roughly 80 years before Atalanta Fugiens. For Agrippa, melancholy is the source of inspiration. It happens also sometimes that not only they that are asleep, but also they that are watchful, do with a kind of instigation of mind, divine, which divination Aristotle calls ravishment. The first level of melancholy is associated with imagination and artistic activity, melancholia imaginativa, but it can be influenced by inferior spirits. So also there have been many melancholy men at first rude, ignorant, and untractable, as they say Homer and Lucretius were, who on a sudden were taken with a madness, and became poets and prophesied wonderful and divine things, which they themselves scarce understood. So we see that any most ignorant man both presently become an excellent painter or contriver of building, and to become a master in any such art. This second level is associated with the reasoning of scholars and the physicians, melancholia rationalis. When the mind is turned wholly into reason, it becomes a receptacle for middle-world spirits. Hence, it obtains the knowledge and understanding of natural and human things. So we see that a man sometimes without a sudden become a philosopher, physician, or an orator, and foretells mutations of kingdoms and restitutions of ages and such things as belong to them as did the Sibyl to the Romans. The highest, third level is the divine intuition of theologians, like Agrippa himself, of course. That is the mental or speculative melancholy, melancholia mentalis. But when the mind is wholly elevated into the understanding, then it becomes a receptacle of sublime spirits and learns of them the secrets of divine things, such as the law of God and the orders of angels, and such things as belong to the knowledge of things eternal and the ascent of souls. It foresees things which are appointed by predestination, such as future prodigies or miracles, the prophet to come, and the changing of the law. In his preface, Maier describes three kinds of light: vegetable, sensible, and intelligible. These can be rephrased as nature, art, and wisdom. Nature represents our environment, the foundation of our experiences, the grand sphere. The first elevated sphere is art, which is synonymous with experience. This aligns closely with Agrippa's concept of melancholia imaginativa, but Maier emphasizes the physical, sensible aspect, encompassing everything from the work of physician to the craft of an orator. Later, Maier probably subdivided the intelligible kind of life further into reason and reading, as we can see in emblem 42. This division may have been influenced by Agrippa, as reason corresponds to melancholia rationalis. Agrippa's third concept, melancholia mentalis, was then likely divided further by Maier into two themes, the first pertaining primarily to the quest for the idea, reading, and the second to transcendence. Based on the preface, it is possible that the initial grouping of topics followed the three kinds of life: vegetable, sensible, and intelligible. Later, perhaps under Agrippa's influence, Maier subdivided the intelligible kind of life into reason or wisdom and reading or the quest, as we can see in emblem 42. At some point, the emblems about art were appended. Finally, Agrippa's third melancholia mentalis was split into the themes of the quest and transcendence. This intermingling of concepts also implies that the topics in Atalanta Fugiens are not systematically arranged in every detail, appearing more as a work in progress, partly because Maier was neither a mathematician nor a natural scientist, but more of a philosopher. In the book, we can find traces of how Maier refers to these themes, how his thought process evolved, and how he incorporated new themes, probably influenced by Agrippa's famous book. The next part explores some of the broader conceptual frameworks that underpin the entire book.